In 1982, the Miller family moved into Blackwood Manor, a grand Victorian house in a quiet Connecticut town. Ben and Laura Miller had always dreamed of owning a spacious home where their children, Ethan and Grace, could grow up happily. When they discovered the house was selling for an unbelievably low price, they couldn't resist. The realtor mentioned the property's long vacancy but avoided explaining why. The Millers dismissed it as local gossip. The first day seemed promising, but Laura couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that the house was watching them. The air inside was heavy, and every footstep echoed unnaturally. As they unpacked, Grace found an old doll in one of the closets. She brought it to her room, unaware of its sinister history. That night, strange things began to happen. Grace woke up crying, saying a woman was sitting at the foot of her bed. Ethan complained of scratching sounds coming from inside the walls. Laura brushed it off as first-night jitters. But the following days made it impossible to ignore the signs. Doors would slam shut on their own, foul smells lingered despite their cleaning efforts, and cold spots appeared randomly in rooms. Laura often felt as though someone was standing behind her, watching her every move. One afternoon, Laura stumbled upon a dusty journal hidden in the attic. It belonged to Margaret Blackwood, the original owner. Margaret was a reclusive widow who had lived in the house in the late 1800s. The journal detailed her obsession with the occult and her desperate attempts to contact her deceased husband. The final entries became increasingly erratic, describing a ritual to summon his spirit. Margaret wrote of a dark presence that emerged instead, tormenting her until her mysterious death. As Laura read the journal, the hauntings intensified. Grace began talking to an unseen presence, calling it the lady. One evening, Ben heard loud whispers coming from the basement. When he investigated, he found claw marks on the walls and the words "Leave now" scrawled in what looked like ash. Terrified, the family sought answers from a local historian. They learned that Margaret Blackwood had not only summoned something dark but also placed a curse on the house before her death. Every family that had lived in Blackwood Manor since had either fled or met tragic ends. Determined to protect his family, Ben decided they would leave. But the house had other plans. On their final night, the walls began oozing a black, tar-like substance. Shadows grew larger and more defined, moving independently of any light. At exactly midnight, the shadowy figure of a woman emerged, her hollow eyes fixed on Ben. The family tried to escape, but the doors locked on their own. Laura remembered Margaret's journal and rushed to the garden, where the historian had said her ashes were buried. With Ethan and Grace helping, they unearthed a small box containing the remains. As the shadow grew closer to Ben, Laura set the box ablaze. A deafening scream echoed through the air, and the shadow vanished. The house began to shake, its walls cracking and collapsing as the family ran outside. Standing at a safe distance, they watched as Blackwood Manor crumbled into rubble. Though the house was gone, the Millers were never the same. They sold the property and moved far away, never speaking of the events again. But sometimes, when Laura closed her eyes, she could still hear whispers and feel the cold stare of the shadow that nearly claimed her family. Some stories are better left untold. Blackwood Manor was one of them.